On today's video, I'm honouring Portal Games. With PortalCon just around the corner, I thought it would be good to do my top 10 favourite games that they've published. Hi everyone and welcome to another top 10 list. Igancy asked me very nicely if I could do a live reaction video to his keynote seminar on the 23rd of January. Well, I've never done one of those before, so I thought why not, and that will eventually be in the schedule listing on my channel, so have a look on there and you should eventually see a live date being scheduled for the future. But what I thought I'd do on the side, which Igancy didn't know about, is that I wanted to do a top 10 list focusing on occasionally the odd designer or the odd publisher that I really like the games of. And because there are some publishers who may have only done about 5 games, there may be a designer where they've done 20 games, but I only like 4 of them, so I need to be able to find 10 that I can sing home about. Well, Portal Games is one of those publishers where I can think, yeah, there's 10 games that I can talk high praise over, and I figure it'd be good to just do this top 10 list here. So that's essentially what I'm doing, going through their line of games and picking my favourite 10 personally. Now, little caveat with that, I am talking about Portal's original ideas. Now, hopefully I won't make a mistake on thinking that a game was originally by them when it was actually originally by someone else, but lately Portal produce a lot of games in Polish specifically. Like lately, I mean, if you go on Portal on Board Game Geek, you'll see they've got stuff like Blood Rage and Root and a few other sort of obscure games, and Teotihuacan, for example, all on Portal games. Yeah, well, they didn't come up with the ideas originally, they just brought them to Poland. I'm talking about the games where when we think of this game, it's like, no. Portal came up with that one first, at least to the best of my knowledge. So that's just the way it's going to be. So without further ado, let's get cracking with my number 10. Yeah, for me, Neuroshima Hex is a great game. It's a really good game, but it's my number 10. It's not my favourite game that they've ever produced, and mainly the reason for that is it's a 2-player game, really. Yeah, you can play it with 3 and 4, and Monolith Arena is kind of sort of shoehorned into this number as well because they're very similar games. I just prefer Neuroshima Hex, really, mainly due to its theme. One is generic fantasy and one is post-apocalyptic. Neither are themes that I go mad for, but I'd rather go post-apocalyptic. The main problem is that it really is best played as a 2-player game, and I don't get 2-player games to the table that often. So this is one that I've occasionally played on the app version, which I will say the app for Neuroshima Hex is fantastic. But it's a cool puzzle game where each of you has a different faction, and there's so many of them now, with varied powers, and you're placing these tiles on a sort of a hexagonal grid map in order to take out an opponent's base, but they're also trying to do the same to yours, and the various units that you use have different abilities. They attack different things or they block different things, and eventually somebody plays a fight tile or the whole thing fills up, and then everything on the map just sort of activates and pretty much kills each other in a sort of a mass bloodshed. And the idea is that something might attack another tile, but then that tile is protected by this tile, whereas they're standing next to a tower, which means they get defense, which means that tile doesn't kill that. So you basically go through all the different abilities and resolve the combat, and then when everything's kind of half dead, in a sense, players take it in turns to put more tiles on, and you continue in this fashion until somebody eventually knocks out the opponent's base. There's a few extra little bits on top, but I've only played Neuroshima Hex in a very basic form, whereas nowadays I think you can get, I've lost count of how many of those factions you can get, but there's tons of content out for you. Failing that, just check out the app, really. But it's a cool game. It's not one I own. Like I say, 2-player games kind of hit and miss in my collection, but it's still a solid game. I've seen tournaments of this over at PortalCon when I've been over there at Poland, where they go nuts for it. I mean, there are competitions with loads of people playing Neuroshima Hex, and I guarantee every single one of them would kick my butt if I tried to challenge them. I'm not the best at this game, but it's certainly worth a mention. Neuroshima Hex. Imperial Settlers Roll and Write is my number 9, and this is their little Roll and Write spin-off that they did of their Imperial Settlers game, which may or may not appear later in the list, but it's basically a small little Roll and Write where it's an engine building Roll and Write. You're rolling the dice, you're getting resources, and you're using the resources to cross off bits on tracks, harvest from fields, build bridges so you can go to other fields and construct buildings. Now, I mainly like this for its solo mode. The multiplayer is fine, but you don't really care about the other players. I mean, the fact that they're there is just kind of inconsequential, really. But the cool thing with this in a solo mode is that you get this pad with all these different layouts of buildings. So, you know, one game you'll play, there's 6 buildings, and then the next one's 6 different ones, 6 different ones, 6 different ones, and there's like about 40 of them, like 40 of these sheets. So every single game plays differently just by seeing a new set of buildings, even though the goals of cross off these tracks, get the fields and everything is still the same. But you could play the same game 3 or 4 times with the same sheet, and it would still be pretty different because you can't build all 6 buildings, or at least you're not recommended to. So you find that you try different paths every time you use the same sheet. There's a ton of replay value in this, and it's a pretty simple roll and write. Roll the dice, collect the resources on it, and then just cross off your sheet as you do. But it's quite thinky how you have to cope with it. If I do have a few nitpicks with it on solo mode even, it's that you roll a dice and one of them has a special icon that you can choose a bonus, but there's only really 2 or 3 bonuses that are worth taking in a solo mode, and I wish that maybe there was kind of like some tweaks to the rules just to balance it out a bit more for solo mode so you don't constantly just take the same effect. But that little nitpick aside, I have taken this on flights. In fact, I think last time I flew to PortalCon, I actually took Imperial Settlers Roll and Write in my bag to use whilst I was in the airport lounge. So, you know, it's a nice little game, and I think I've still got it on my shelf actually. It's still sitting on my Portal shelf, again, just as a kind of like, I'm going travelling, I just need a small game. Well, Imperial Settlers Roll and Write will do me quite nicely, because I don't even need to take it all in the box. I could just bag it up and pretty much take the same sort of thing. But I'm not the biggest fan of roll and writes, I'll admit. And at heart, you know, I'm starting to get a little bit tired of roll and write. Sorry, Suzanne, but it's just the way it is. There's too many of them, and I still never found that copy of Harvest Dice. You remember the one I was talking about that I said I lost? Never found it. I need another copy of it, stat. But yeah, it's a cool little roll and write. Probably my 2nd or 3rd favourite roll and write that I've played. And granted, there's probably a ton I have not played, but out of all the ones I have, I still really like this one. My number 9. Now, I wonder how many of you saw this one coming. Legacy, the Testament of Duke de Clichy, I think it's how you pronounce it. This is a game that probably most people haven't even heard of from Portal, and it came out quite a while back, actually, if I think about it. But it's a cool little Euro card game, but with a surprisingly good amount of theme. Essentially, you're building a family tree. You start off with your patriarch, and then you're playing cards in order to marry off your friends to various suitors.
Change your plan!
And in marrying them, you're trying to sort of fulfill like set collection bonuses in a sense, not just blue, red and green, but you might marry to someone who, like, oh, if you marry to various British people, they'll give you extra points. If you get free boys, they'll give you extra points, that sort of thing. And as you play the cards, you get as you marry them off, you get the kids, and that kid will, you know, depend on what people you're marrying may give you bonuses. You get income from some, you have to pay income from others. It's just a cool little, neat little card game. But what I love is that the theme is actually pretty strong in it, in how you build up this family tree, and, you know, all the people with different characteristics, and they've all got slightly weird quirks in terms of their artwork and that. But even though there is a slightly touchy little thematic thing here about, we'll just call it complications, you know, other than that, the theme is still pretty cool, and people are always making references or just like taking the mick out of each other's family. Like, you know, you were marrying somebody over here who's like, you know, got, you know, it's like, nose is a little bit funny on that one, and, you know, my entire family is just a bunch of Brit males or something. It can be, you can get lots of cool little jokes with that. But I must admit, I don't own this game, and it's been a long time since I played it, but I've still got fond memories of playing it. That's why it's still in this top 10 and my number 8. This is actually one I'm considering trying to find a second-hand copy and maybe getting hold of it again, because it's not bad. It's a pretty, sorry, not bad, that's the wrong word entirely. It's a good, solid card game, and most people wouldn't have heard of it. They probably passed it on, especially with that huge title, Legacy, the Testament of whatever, who gives a monkeys. But it's just a cool, underrated little gem, actually. I mean, I'd give it probably about 7, maybe even an 8 out of 10. It's not too long, it's not complicated, but it has a strong theme for what is essentially a Euro set collection game. Legacy. For my number 7, we have Imperial Settlers. This is the game that loads of people should know about when you're talking about Portal games. This is an engine builder where you take control of a civilization like Egypt or the Barbarians or the Romans, and you play cards from both a communal deck but also your own personal deck, where you build these buildings that can get you resources, get your points for spending resources, give you special abilities, and each faction plays very differently. This is kind of one of those games where there's a lot of differentiation, but the bloat is starting to slightly hurt this one a bit. I really like it though. The artwork on the cards is really nice and colourful, and I think the solo mode is pretty solid in this one. The problem I have with it at the moment is that, yes, you've got things like the Aztecs and the, the Amazonians one, I can't remember. There was the Atlanteans, there's all these different factions that you can get, and it's great that they're there and there's all this variety, but the problem is that unless you play with every card you ever acquired, you're going to have to deck build slightly with your factions, and that's a little bit of an off-put for me. I'd rather just shove it all together and play it because it's less effort. But those who are serious to really get into this as an engine builder can basically go, right, well, I've got all these cards for the Egyptians, let me build this 30 card deck for myself. You've still got the communal deck and you can still just shove everything together for that lot, but for this one you kind of need to be a little bit more knowledgeable about how your faction works. But it's a cool game, 5 rounds, you just keep playing the cards and doing, building up that engine, getting those combos out together, everybody being slightly different. Like the Egyptians want a lot of gold, the Romans are happy to sort of go pillage other people's stuff, the Japanese are a little bit weaker in their defense, but they can do other cool stuff. So, and with the extra factions, you've got a good amount of variety in the boxes, once you get some of those factions, but then the base 4 will still keep you going for a while. It's smooth, pretty elegant. If I have one slight quirk with it is that if you play with 3 or 4 players, it can take a bit long, so I tend to reserve this as pretty much a solo game or a 2-player game, and maybe there was another game that kind of eclipsed this, we'll get onto that later, but Imperial Settlers, still solid and still currently on the shelf for my number 7. For my 6, it's a contentious one with First Martians. First Martians gets spoken about kind of in whispers on the internet and on Facebook groups, where somebody will come in and go, I'm curious about First Martians, should I get it? And then you get a lot of mixed responses based on everyone's experience. First Martians still sits on my shelf and I still really enjoy this game. This is kind of like the spin-off from Robinson Crusoe, and it is basically The Martian, or was it The Martian, the movie, the one with Matt Damon in it. And pretty good movie actually. And the idea is that you start off on the base on Mars. You've got some standalone scenarios as well as a normal campaign and a legacy campaign. And the idea is that things are starting to go to pot. The machines are breaking, your oxygen tank's leaking, the rover's busted. But you have to complete certain missions, like go explore, go repair certain things, deal with a pandemic if you get some of the download the free DLC scenarios. But while you're doing this, as I say, things are malfunctioning, things are going wrong, so you got to try and keep the base under control and stay alive while completing your mission in the time you've got. Like I say, it plays very similarly to Robinson Crusoe. Isn't quite as hard as Robinson Crusoe, although if you up the difficulty it can get that way, but if you play it on easy, it's a pretty decent challenge without being overwhelming. If you play it on normal, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Hard will kick your butt nearly every time, but I don't play things on hard for the most part anyway. But the problem people had with this was their initial reactions when it first came out. It did have a little bit of a shaky start with the launch. The app wasn't particularly good, it was a bit buggy. 2 weeks! And the rulebook is, sorry, diabolical. Like one of the worst rulebooks out there. But there is a solution. The app is fine now. The app's bug-free. I use it on a phone and a tablet and I have no problems with it whatsoever. As for the rulebook, Rodney Smith did a Watch It Played video. Works well, and there's a person on Board Game Geek who has done a revised rulebook where it's still in the same layout as the original book, except they've moved stuff around and tweaked some of the wording to make it a lot clearer. In fact, I'll put a link in the description for it to help you guys out. But it's a solid game. If you're just willing to conquer that slight rules barrier, this is a good game just waiting to get played, and it's not getting any extra support because of the kind of backlash that it had, which is why Robinson Crusoe pretty much gets all the love. But to be honest, there's been a couple of DLC scenarios for it. There's 6 in the box already, 2 campaigns, one of them a legacy one of them a one you can repeat. there's enough content in there for you, and you can pick this up for such a stupidly low price. It's unreal, like £15 in some sales in the UK. Honestly, give it a try if that theme and the whole Robinson Crusoe-esque style play, takes your fancy, because I play it solo and it works very well solo, but you can play this 2, 3 or 4 player fine and it will still do the job. Honestly, don't write this one off just yet. First Martians, my 6. Yeah, are you shocked, heavy Eurogamers? Predaporter is my number 5, and this one from my review that I've done, check it out, is one that shocked a lot of people. Because people look at me and sort of go, hang on a minute, do you like heavy Euros? You don't seem to like a lot of these long, heavy Euros. Yeah, to be fair, if they go on too long and I'm not entertained throughout, I'm not going to like them. But economic games, in particular, don't tend to win me over either. I'm a tax accountant as my day job. I don't want to have to do it for a game. It's just like, oh great, this again. But some economic games do win me over, usually the light stuff. I've got, would you call stockpile an economic game? Probably not. Yeah, but there's a few little light ones that I go, yeah, these are cool. These I'm fine with. Predaporter is the heavy economic game though, where I go, yes, this is one I can get behind. One reason? The theme. Super strong theme. This one is about running your own fashion business. So you've got to run the company aspect and pay your employees and get the buildings and that and pay your upkeep, but you've also got to collect like fashion designs, get a collection and put on a show at the end of every quarter. And so there are different ways to score points, particularly with the paths that you take via the contracts or the employees and the buildings you get, and it looks gorgeous on the table. It's very thinky. You have got to be really good with your money management in this game, because you will park yourself in a corner and never get out if you're not careful. And as I say, that theme is super strong. People are constantly making digs and references at other people's things, you're all obsessed with quality over there. It's like, I don't care if I've only got one shirt, it is made from the finest elk fur, and it will be like finest cuts of elk, and it will be fantastic. Whereas then my lot has got a bucket load of employees in a bucket load of buildings, and I'm like, quality? What's that? And I've basically just got like a cheap labor force that's giving me all the stuff like to do with social media and that. It's like, it's all about how good your public image is, not how good your actual clothes are. It's like, you get this sort of stuff happening. Now, again, slight issue I do have with it, there is one card in there that isn't worded very well. You can actually get an almanac from the Portal website. I might put a link to that in the description if I remember. And basically it gives you clarifications on all the cards. And you will notice one of them is worded very differently to how it is on the card. That's a little bit of annoyance, but get the almanac, it'll be fine. The other thing is that the investment house is too powerful in this game. So I basically have a house rule that says limit 1 per player. It's already pretty good if you have it by yourself and you've got the right setup, but if you end up with more than one of them, you win the game. So I say limit 1 per person, and that solves that problem for me. So yeah, it needed 1 or 2 tiny little tweaks to be like the 9 out of 10 that it is for me, but I still think this is a great game. This is like the heavy economic game where if somebody says like, you don't like the train games, you don't like the the brass or the city of the big shoulders and all that stuff, what economic game do you like? This one, Predaporter. Yes, of course, who hasn't heard of this one when we're talking about Portal games? Robinson Crusoe is the ultimate survival game. Here, you have got to survive on this island and you're doing everything from building log fires to fighting cannibals, checking out lost tombs, even fighting King Kong in one of the weird promo scenarios. But the idea is that this is a co-op game that is incredibly punishing. And I'm not usually a fan of punishing games, but that's usually in competitive games. I don't mind it too much when it's a co-op, because, well, it's a survival game. You need to survive against the odds. But this one creates all sorts of funny stories. In fact, the Dice Tower live play of this, I think it was at one of their cons, Igancy teaches Sam Healy how to play it. If I can find a link, I'll put it in the video, but seriously, if you get a chance to watch that, it is one of the funniest things committed to YouTube. It is such a good playthrough of Robinson Crusoe. But it's great how, you can approach scenarios in a different way each time depending on the characters you're using, how many players, and even what inventions you do, but also what events come out of the deck. You have these events that come up and it'll be like, you find a bush with some berries on it, and it's like, that seems very nice, you know, what possible harm could come out of eating berries? Very nice. And then later on, about 3 rounds later, suddenly you're like, I don't feel good, Stark. You know, you end up with some problems that might bite you later on, but you want the immediate benefit now. So you do get some really good little sort of mini tales that derive from it, and on top of that, it's just a very entertaining co-op and certainly a challenge. And by now, with an expansion, a proper expansion, a sort of weird expansion, the Beagle one, Voyage of the Beagle, I didn't really get into that one. They had the Mystery Tales one, and now they've got this, they've just brought out a little box of promos basically, and now they've got the adventure book coming at the keynote seminar. So there's plenty of content for this game if you want it, but you just have to accept that it's going to smack you in the face a little bit while you're playing it, but in a good way. It creates good fun, tension, and as I say, you want a challenge. I can think of no better challenge for a survival game other than possibly this War of Mine. Both of them are kind of on similar levels of, oh my word, we're going to die horribly. But it's all good fun at the end of the day. Now, if you're only recently into board gaming, this is probably the title where you're thinking, oh, that's Portal Games, is it? Detective. Detective is probably my go-to choice for a deduction game at this point in time. I mean, I love Chronicles of Crime, it's down on the shelf behind my legs there, but Detective is the one that I prefer the most. Both of them do a really good job of giving you a decent theme, a good storyline, but Detective is a heavier affair. This is one where it's going to take you a good 2 to 3 hours to get through a particular scenario, and that's if there's only maybe 1 or 2 of you. It could be even longer if you've got multiple players. But whether you do the 5 scenario campaign from the base box or pick up one of the season 1 box I did a review on a while back with standalone cases, which if you're brand new to the saga I probably recommend you do, but on top of it, it gives a good story while giving a very heavy deduction feel. Here you need to be doing everything from mind maps to, you know, like typing on the interface, which is not an app. Relax people, it's not an app, it's just like a web browser thing that you use. But you use it to get mug shots and put fingerprints through and look up stuff on Wikipedia to help you with the case. It's really cool, interactive and immersive stuff. It's basically like playing an episode of CSI Miami, like straight up. You know, Chronicles has you doing the scans with the app, but you're doing like a kind of light-hearted detective story there. Here, this is full-on CSI. Some tech whiz on the computer, someone doing the mind map thing of trying to link up what's his relationship to that person and what do they think. Somebody else trying to figure out clues, and it's all sorts of stuff that goes into this. You know, and all from essentially a deck of cards. You got a deck of cards, little mini board, and maybe some few pieces on it. That's literally it. It's pretty much all contained in the text on those cards. All the story, the clues, the hints, and I must admit we do love the sort of gag that with the original box set they do have a fascination of talking about what they had for lunch a bit too often, but I don't know, that's a little weird writing there, but we just laughed it off as a nice little joke. But it's a solid game. Really enjoyed it. I've played every single case to date. I tend to lose this more often than I win it, but I mean, like I say, I'm not the best deducting person in the world.
And exactly how many times did he fall out the window?
But I look forward to future content, so if there's going to be some more standalone cases come out, and like I say, Portal have been releasing quite a lot of them for this one, you know, they're constantly pumping out content for this game to keep it fresh and interesting, then I'm all for it. Detective, my number 3. Now, I wonder how many of you at home forgot that this was a Portal game. Yep, my number 2 is, of course, Yeah, this is regarded as one of the hardest names to pronounce with regards to, like, any of the Portal games lineup. And I have to, like, look on my phone here for what I believe is the phonetic pronunciation of this, Tajemnicze Domostwo.
We have to wait for Vegeta and Trunks to come out of the hypertonic lion tamer.
That one was on purpose.
Could have been.
If I'm wrong, then I do apologize. It's not exactly like Polish is my first language here. But this is what Mysterium became from Asmodee. So people know the big blue box, and it's on my shelf, 9 out of 10, you know, it's a fantastic game. Portal originally came up with it though, and essentially there's so little difference between the two that I think it's eligible for me to talk about it on this Portal list. You still have the same deduction Cluedo element with those Dixit cards of saying out, right, each person needs to figure out their, you know, the person, the weapon, and the location. in respect to a Cluedo-style murder. Each person has their own separate lineup, and the ghost is giving you Dixit cards to try and point you in the right direction. Fantastic game. I love every game with these Dixit cards, you know, using like pictures to portray emotion or portray information. I just love the way that a picture speaks 1,000 words. It just kind of works with me. But with this, the only real difference is that the Asmodee version threw in the clairvoyance tokens, which most people who like Mysterium would argue was a waste of time, and there's a slight variant with the end part of the game or something. Aside from that, they're identical, just slightly different artwork styles, but frankly, the Portal artwork looks very good as well. It's just a different style to the Asmodee one. But I enjoyed this one so much, regardless of whether I'm on the deduction side or the ghost side. When I'm teaching, I tend to be the ghost because it's more tense for new players. So I like to take that tension away from them, be the ghost, and go, you know, how do I use these weird images to portray? You take these two, you take these one, and then you sit there silently cursing all the rest of the players around the table as one person gets the right idea, and you're like, well, good, shut up, boy, as somebody else tries to lead them off on a different tangent. It's just great that you can't talk back. You have to kind of deal with it, use what they're saying, and think, right, well, they're thinking along these lines. How do I adjust what I give them now? But even on the deduction side, I like looking at these pictures that I'm given and going, what on earth are you trying to tell me? I was like, I could link to that, you know, but either way, it's great fun. I never owned the Portal version myself. I only have the Asmodee one, but frankly, like I say, tomato, tomato, if you gave me the Portal one, if you told me I couldn't have the Mysterium one, I could only have the Portal one, big deal. Same game, pretty much. So, you know, I think it's pretty eligible for this list, but it's my number 2 favourite game from Portal. I love this one. It's completely unlike a lot of games that tend to come out from Portal. I mean, this is effectively a party game, and Portal aren't usually known for that sort of thing, but when they did do this party game, they hit it out of the gate. Love this one at my number 2.
You knew this was coming, Pete.
Yeah, of course you knew this was coming. And when I talked about Imperial Settlers earlier, I pretty much like foreshadowed this from a mile away. And if you've been checking out my top 100, you would have noticed it was the highest on that list as well. Empires of the North is the successor to what Imperial Settlers was. Imperial Settlers is still a great game. It's on my shelf, but how much longer it will be on my shelf, I don't know. Because the problem is, as much as they are slightly different games, I think Empires of the North just eclipsed it. This one effectively takes that same engine building style of, here's my little civilization, here's my cards, right, these will generate resources, these use the resources to do actions, and these actions get me points. It's an engine builder. But you've got the addition of the little action wheel where this will be different every game, and you've got like a kind of token flip mechanic on it. So it's like, how often can I use this action wheel to my advantage? You've got a sailing mechanic where you can go off to different islands and either pillage for resources or inhabit the island for a victory points and also a special ability. Those are really cool and they're different every game. But the thing I love most is that the factions, not only are they quintessentially different from each other, just like before, but they are self-contained. The idea with Imperial Settlers is that once you've got so many cards, it encourages you to deck build. Not a huge fan of that, especially if I'm going to play this with newbies a lot of the time. Empires of the North, though, it's like Sentinels in the Multiverse. Every single faction has its own deck. No other thing, just like, I want to play the Japanese faction over here. Boink, there's your deck, go. You know, I fancy playing the Barbarians, boink, here's your deck, go. And it doesn't take you long when playing with the deck to understand how it works. Maybe you might flummox a little bit for your first game, but then if you were to play it a second time, you'd be like, right, I get the gist, this is what they want to do, cool, gonna do it. But it just makes it so easy to teach the game because the rules themselves are not particularly complicated. If you've played Imperial Settlers, you already know like 75% of the rules anyway. And I can just say to people, look, pick a faction. Here's the ones that are lower difficulty range, pick one, you should be pretty good. And as much as I prefer to play this solo or like 3 players absolute max, it's really good as a 2-player. But even, like I say, the solo mode's really good. It's similar to Imperial Settlers, but you've got different scenarios that you play through, so they've got little events that happen, different win conditions and that. And there's a good amount of those, and Portal like to put out little DLC Easter eggs every now and again with extra scenarios. We're getting to the point where the whole of the North bit is a little bit ridiculous now, because we already had like Japanese, okay, sort of North. You know, we've had Romans, bit further south, but okay. We had Barbarians, You could argue it's Northern Barbarians, but then we've now got North Egyptians coming out. Okay, now we're jumping the shark. So Igancy knows this, I'm sure, but I think it's just a running gag with this. But the fact that he has to call it North Egyptians kind of says it all, really. But like I say, that minor little thematic blemish aside, it's still a great engine builder, one of my favourite engine building games in my collection. It took what was already a great game in Imperial Settlers and bumped it up to 11. It just fixed any flaws I had with Imperial Settlers, fixed, done. Hence, it had to be my #1 game. So that's my top 10 favourite games from Portal, and best wishes to you over there in Poland Portal, US Portal, all the other different branches of Portal. Just best wishes to you all, really, because whenever I've gone to visit you in Poland itself, you know, for PortalCon, or when I've seen you at Essen and UK Games Expo, there's one thing I notice about Portal's way of working. When you look at other publishers and you see the team working together, you get the idea that this is a well-functioning team. They like games and they're good together. It's a well-oiled machine. With Portal, especially the Polish branch, I think it's more a family unit. Even though they're not necessarily family relatives or anything, when you see them interact with each other, it's like they've missed each other for weeks whenever they see like one another. And you just get the idea that it's not just simply a well-oiled team, it's a close family unit that just is not only just passionate about games, but passionate about seeing each other and working with each other and doing these sort of things. And that's the kind of feeling I get whenever I see them. But their games, you know, they produce quite a lot of games. I don't go for every single game that they've ever produced. I mean, there's a couple I didn't mention I've not played. I've not played Theseus. That one slipped the net for me, and because two-player games are hard for me to get to the table, I've not actually played Stronghold, the original or the undead version, so I can't really comment on that. But if somebody wants to teach me Stronghold, I would very much like to try it. I just, like I say, two-player complex game, hard for me to get to the table, so I just kind of avoided that one. But I would be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments about whether Stronghold is right for you. In terms of my Patreons voted for which one they wanted as the Patreon choice, and well, no surprise to me really, Robinson Crusoe made the cut. I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but it seems that my Patreons are also good fans of Robinson Crusoe, so I'm sure from the keynote seminar coming up, I'm sure they'll be glad to hear what's coming out with this book of adventures, and I'm sure I will be as well. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you're seeing, I've earned your subscription, please consider subscribing, retweet this on Twitter, share on Facebook, get the word out as much as possible. I would greatly appreciate it. There's a Patreon campaign you can subscribe to if you want to help out the channel, but don't also forget to check out my description for the 5% discount code from zatu.co.uk, where you can order a lot of great games to fill up some gaps on your shelf this COVID season. Don't forget to tune in to the live reaction video I'll be doing to the keynote seminar from Portal, and until that time, take care, and remember, it's only a game. Bye for now.